Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to talk to you about what people over 60 should eat for breakfast. Of course, breakfast is a very important meal in our daily lives, and for many people, it's even the main meal of the day. It gives us more energy, helps us wake up, and gives us more disposition for the day. For people over 60, some needs may be different. So that's why I made this video to help you with that and even give you some examples. You're going to love it. Stay until the end because you won't want to miss it. Before we start the video, take a moment to tell me down below. What do you usually have for breakfast? Of course, I know that this can vary a bit, right? Some people have different breakfasts throughout the week, but usually we tend to eat the same thing. Not every day, but we eat certain things more often, maybe once or twice a week. And on weekends, breakfast is a bit different. Let me know down below in the comments what your usual breakfast is like and if it changes on the weekend or not. Breakfast is one of the most important meals for many people. Because of course, a lot of people wake up hungry. Even if you don't wake up starving, it's still a very important time to eat, mainly because it's the moment when you'll break your fast. We fast during the night, or at least we should at the very least. 12 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. The amount of time you sleep and don't eat. Because ideally, once we go to sleep, we shouldn't wake up to snack, to get up, to eat anything, to nibble during the night. So let's think about the fact that normally you sleep 7-8 hours. That's already a little fast that you do, and that's important, even for intestinal rest. There are people who choose to extend this fast a bit and do a 12-hour fast, which we even call a kind of physiological fast. Because think about it. If you had dinner at 7 or 8 p.m. and then have breakfast at 7 or 8 a.m., that's totally doable and not at all harsh for you to do. And it brings some benefits, like the intestinal rest I mentioned to you, and it also helps regulate blood sugar. So breaking this fast is very important. And with the right foods, it's even better for our bodies. Another important point is that breaking the fast with this first meal of the day, breakfast, can also help regulate blood glucose levels or blood sugar throughout the day. That's because depending on what you eat at that moment, you can cause a bigger spike in glucose and blood sugar, and as a result, you might experience a sharp drop in those energy and glucose levels. Because when we consume a large amount of simple refined carbohydrates, this really triggers a response from the body with an increase in insulin. And in this case, that insulin spike stores his glucose into the tissues very quickly, and then the drop is abrupt, making you hungrier and more tired. That's why people say, I have breakfast and then by 10 a.m. I feel sleepy, I feel really tired. It could be that your breakfast is unbalanced, so I'll give you more tips about this as well. But as a rule, avoid consuming too many simple carbohydrates, too much white bread, or white toast. Just because it's toast doesn't mean it necessarily has a lower glycemic index. Be careful with too much honey, too much sugar, too much high glycemic fruit, but especially with too much fruit juice at this time, because this can also negatively affect your breakfast. Another important thing to remember is that when we wake up, we need to actually wake up our brain too, not just our metabolism. So, depending on the nutrients you consume at this time, you'll have more energy to think better, remember the things you need throughout the day, and have greater cognitive capacity. So, providing good carbohydrates with a lower glycemic index so that this energy is released gradually is important for you. High biological value proteins are also important, and of course, good nutrients. For example, eggs. They are very rich in healthy fats, good proteins, and choline, which is an essential nutrient for our brain and for cognitive function as well. Another important point about breakfast, especially for those over 60, is the issue of satiety. Because we know that when you don't eat the right foods, you can end up getting hungry very quickly, and that will have a negative impact. Because usually as the years go by, metabolism can start to slow down, right? For most people, this can happen. And if you already, for example, have breakfast at 7 or 8 in the morning, by 10 o'clock you already feel like eating a cookie, snacking, eating a little something different that disrupts your hunger control, and it can negatively affect weight management and lead to more excessive weight gain, which can harm your health because we already know that excess weight can be related to the metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, increased cholesterol, cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure. Not everyone who is overweight has these health problems, but we know it can be a risk factor, especially when we're talking about obesity. So it's important to control your hunger after breakfast as well. So let's think about what you should definitely have for breakfast. It's important that we start the day with protein and especially lean protein whenever possible. A great example for you to add to your breakfast is eggs, because they're a very complete and nutrient-rich food. Eggs have high biological value protein, which is albumin. They contain healthy fats, choline, lots of vitamins and minerals. It's truly a complete food. That egg turns into a chick, it becomes a whole little animal. So it's a very healthy food. And several studies have already shown that when you eat eggs for breakfast, you can make it to lunch without feeling the urge to snack. It's a food that provides a lot of satiety at that moment and a more prolonged feeling of fullness. So it's an excellent addition to your daily routine, to your breakfast. And you can always enhance it, even with other healthy foods, which I'll give you tips on later. There are other protein options. It's not just eggs. It could be milk, yogurt, cheese. It could be chicken, tuna, depending on what you're making, whether it's a sandwich or not. So always remember to keep an open mind, okay? Even chickpea spread hummus is rich in protein. I have a recipe for it here on the channel. So varying these sources of healthy protein a bit is a good option. I, for example, don't recommend that you add sausage or bacon to your breakfast because even though these foods are sources of protein, they're very fatty with a lot of saturated fat and they're processed products with nitrites and nitrates in every sausage. So the quality of the protein is very low. They're usually made with mechanically separated meat and have a lot of added fat and are highly processed with lots of preservatives. So it's not a good idea to add them to your breakfast, okay? Another group of foods that's extremely important to add to your breakfast, especially if you're over 60, is fiber. Because usually older people tend to have a slower digestive system, right? They have more difficulty with bowel movements, and sometimes people start to develop hemorrhoids or anal fissures because they get very constipated. With such a sluggish intestine, the stool becomes very dry and that causes problems. And when we consume fiber first thing in the morning, it really wakes up the digestive system. A really good tip is before your breakfast, drink a large glass of water. There's a video here on the channel that talks more about drinking water on an empty stomach and all its benefits. Just plain water, nothing added, and all the health benefits it brings. I'll leave the link to that video here in the description. Another important detail is that if you can drink cold water on an empty stomach, it's even better for your digestive system. When the cold water hits your empty stomach, it causes a contraction, a little shock to the pylorus, which is the valve that connects the stomach to the small intestine. So this valve closes very quickly, and then you stimulate peristalsis, the intestinal contractions, and with that, the process of evacuation. Of course, this is great and helps your intestinal transit work properly. But remember that to have good intestinal flow for evacuation, you need to have fiber. That's very important. Soluble and insoluble fibers play different roles when it comes to constipation, so consuming fiber is important. Drinking water to hydrate these fibers is also extremely important because otherwise, on the contrary, it could actually block your intestines, right? So whenever we eat foods that are higher in fiber, we need to drink plenty of water and consume healthy fats to help lubricate these stools so that they can be expelled more easily. So, good foods that are rich in fiber, which you can add to your breakfast. Oats, whether in the form of flakes, oat flour, which is nothing more than ground oats, or even oat bran is an interesting option. You can add chia or flaxseed, which in addition to fiber, also have healthy fats, making them great options as well. And other types of fiber too, like psyllium, for example, can be part of your smoothie, or whole grain bread. A homemade oat-based bread can be healthy options for your daily routine. Of course, it's also important for us to consider, especially for this age group, foods that help strengthen bones, such as those rich in calcium and vitamin D. We know that older people, especially women, unfortunately tend to have a higher risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia. So it's a good idea to focus on sources of calcium, like dairy products, and even in this case, dark green leafy vegetables. It might seem strange to include these at breakfast, but I'll give you a really good tip here. I even have a video here on the channel talking about calcium-rich foods that aren't necessarily dairy, but dairy products do fit well at breakfast, don't they? After all, it's usually during small meals that we really focus on consuming dairy, so they don't compete with beans, meat, or other vegetables during the main meals. So ideally, we should consume milk, cheese, and their derivatives during these small meals. Breakfast, along with the afternoon snack and the evening snack, make up the smaller meals we may have depending on our day-to-day diet. And remember that vitamin D is super important for helping calcium get fixed into the bones. Of course, magnesium is also important, as is vitamin K2. I have a video here on the channel where I talk more about this synergistic relationship between nutrients that are connected to bone health. If you want to know more about this, I have a playlist on bones and joints with more tips, and I'll leave it down below in the description for you. And if you like this kind of video for people over 50, over 60, leave your like. That way I'll know you enjoyed it, and I'll bring more videos like this for you. Another interesting detail is that at breakfast, you should consume carbohydrates with a lower glycemic index, that is, those that are absorbed more slowly. This will help you prevent those fluctuations I mentioned, right? That sudden drop in glucose, which makes you hungrier, more tired, more lethargic. But it will also give you a more gradual release of energy throughout the day. And on the contrary, you will feel more energetic, more willing. So it will be more beneficial for you. This is also very important for people living with diabetes and who are over 60 years old. In fact, if that's your case and you need help with meal plans and recipes, I have some really nice material. Take a look below in the description. Another interesting detail that few people remember to add to breakfast is spices. They can bring different nutrients and benefits to this small meal. So, cinnamon can be a good addition to your coffee, for example, or your coffee with milk. Nutmeg also goes well at this time in these meals, in those sweeter recipes, in these sweeter preparations. You can also add turmeric, cumin, and not just spices, but also herbs like parsley and chives to season the recipes you're going to make. Now I'm going to give you some actual meal tips. 3 breakfast meal ideas you can try. Of course, you can vary the quantities or you can add or remove something according to your personal needs. A really good breakfast option is an omelet, where you can use a few eggs depending on your needs. If you're very concerned about cholesterol or too much fat or even just calories, remember that you can remove the yolk and, for example, have 1 whole egg and 2 egg whites, or make an omelet with just egg whites. I have a video here on the channel talking more about whether eggs increase cholesterol or not. This is a very common question. I'll leave the link down below in the description. Then, in this omelet, you can go all out and add those vegetables I mentioned to you, which are also important for breakfast. You can add blanched spinach, grated carrot, grated beetroot. You can put in some cooked or even raw chopped broccoli to cook along with it, bell pepper, onion, whatever you like. This will add nutritional value to your omelet and will make you feel even more satisfied with more fiber, antioxidants, and beneficial nutrients for breakfast. And if you want to round out your breakfast even more by adding a whole grain or low-carb toast, I even have recipes for those here. It can be a good option to eat with your egg and give you more energy. A second breakfast option could be based on natural yogurt. I have a recipe for how to make your own natural yogurt down below in the description. I'll leave it there for you. Or you can buy a store-bought natural yogurt, a good quality one, with just 2 or 3 ingredients. For example, milk or reconstituted milk and lactic ferment. And then you can add either oats or homemade granola. I have a recipe here for natural granola. And even for low-carb granola with fewer carbohydrates, I'll leave it here for you too. You can add another fruit if you want or drizzle a little honey on top. It always depends on your needs, your taste, and your health conditions that you might have. Another interesting option could be making a smoothie, right? Which is really practical for everyday life, for those days when you don't want to spend too much time actually having breakfast but still want to be well nourished. You can use the milk of your choice, whether plant-based or not. Remember that I have a playlist of plant-based milks here. I'll leave it down below in the description for you. And then you can add protein powder or chia or flaxseed or oat bran or rolled oats depending on what you usually have in your daily routine. A serving of fruit can be a good addition. And depending on the smoothie, you can even add some vegetables, like a piece of carrot or a piece of beetroot, for example. These are sweeter vegetables and actually go well in smoothies, right? It can be an interesting option. And you can add plenty of spices as well, like I mentioned earlier. Always remember that this can vary. And regarding breakfast drinks, ideally you should have tea or coffee without sugar or sweetener, and be careful with fruit juices, right? As I mentioned to you, many people have the habit of drinking large amounts of fruit juice at breakfast. This can actually be counterproductive for you. So remember, I have this playlist I told you about with lots of tips for people over 50. So if you want more tips or have any specific questions, write to me down here in the comments. Also tell me what your breakfast is like. I'd love to know what you eat on a daily basis. Is it sweeter? Is it savory? And what time do you have breakfast? I'd love to see your comment. And while you're at it, give the video a like. That really helps me out and lets YouTube know you enjoyed this video. And also, if you liked it and know a friend or family member who could benefit, share this video. Let's work together to grow this chain of kindness. That's what I want here on the channel. See you next time. Bye.